Howdy folks, it is I, the Solo Gamer, returning once again with a little bit more retro goodness, a couple of things I picked up recently, and specifically we're doing some SNES goodness today. And first on the list is a bit of an oddball, but a still notable piece of retro gaming history, Acclaim Entertainment's Spawn. Now, no, this was not based on the movie, but was actually based on the Todd McFarlane comic and animated series, which at the time this came out, that was the principal media for it. Now, Spawn, if you're a comic book fan, you know Spawn. You should know it, you should be familiar with it, it should be all-encompassingly familiar. And this specifically starts with the Wanda's little girl getting kidnapped, and basically runs through a big chunk of the Spawn mythos. Now, to its credit, this game did a lot of really unique things for its time frame. That being said, it wasn't to say it was without its weird foibles or flaws. One of the things that was unique about this game was it had a number of super moves and special abilities in it that you could summon and use throughout the game, but to have an idea as to what they were, you had to actually have the manual. But it was, for its time, a very exceptionally well done game. Like, this was a well represented version of Spawn, with all of his powers, all of his abilities, all of his strengths and weaknesses. But it's a Super Nintendo beat 'em up, a side-scrolling Super Nintendo beat 'em up, and it's very, very much a product of its era. I still love the shit out of it, but I'd also be the first to admit I never beat this damn game. I could probably do it now thanks to the Polymega's ability to include things like cheat moves and all that stuff, but this isn't really for the purpose of beating these games. It is mostly about collecting and the nostalgia of it. Now, you will notice that just like in the comics, Spawn's powers are limited. If you die or get beaten, it takes a huge chunk out of his powers, and that number drops. If it ever goes to 0-0, that's game over for you. Hello, overt kill. But like using Spawn's actual powers is like an instantaneous just smash through. The game also had some neat weather effects for the time, though granted, nothing too fancy. Basic rain, different times of day, some fairly decent light effects. Some of the hell levels have really cool visuals, but it is a late 90s Super Nintendo game, and all that means. And of course, the legendary spawn kick, the dive kick, which, if you were familiar with like the Super Nintendo era, every major beat 'em up had some kind of signature move, and the dive kick was kind of the spawn signature move. Now, it is notable that when you use a super move, it does drain your power, but it also makes you momentarily unbreakable. Like, if you know the super moves, like, they are insanely powerful. We should really find a new line of work, dude. That don't look good for you. But yeah, it is your stereotypical, like all-encompassing superhero beat 'em up. And, like, that's not to say it's bad in any way. It is just a matter of fact that this was a product of its era. And in many ways, like, that's kind of what I love about it, is that it is an unapologetic, old-school 90s beat 'em up. Like, here's another great example. This is also one of the game's biggest issues, was that it was unapologetically brutal and very much a product of that era, in that the difficulty levels were designed to be challenging. Like, these games weren't long. You know, the average playthrough on a decent beat 'em up was a couple of hours tops. Also, generic audio sound from every 16-bit elevator ever. Like, that's actually, you can hear that in Chrono Trigger. Or a variant of it can be heard in Chrono Trigger for some of the elevators in that game, too. Like, everybody used that shit at some point. But yeah, like, this is one of those games that I'd been looking for a while. It was on my list of things to pick up. And I do really miss the old Spawn aesthetic. Like, I'm so glad it made a return with the King in Hell, or whatever it was called. And here's Redeemer, Jason Jason Wynn turned into the spirit of vengeance. I mean, I don't mean that literally, but that as like an unapologetic description of this character. But really, you didn't have to do much to beat this guy. All you had to do was get in close enough, keep blocking, and eventually you could just start landing hits on him. Let's see, you can continue. And if you continue, it brings you right back to where you were. Thing is, you're not actually able to properly kill him. You can damage him, you can hurt him, but you're really just supposed to outmatch him and keep blocking until he hits the window. Yeah, the game was incredibly hard, and it's like no doubt there's a history there of how hard it was. But yeah, it's one of those games that is a definite like Super Nintendo classic, but it was also incredibly difficult. Now, the real game I wanted to show off was this. Now, a lot of people have recently been getting into Gundam. And Gundam Wing in particular has been getting a lot of attention. Although the Witch and Mercury and that new Gaiax or whatever they call it, it was the sort of impetus for Gundam hitting the market again. But a lot of people are rediscovering Wing. A lot of people weren't aware that back in the 90s, there was in fact a Gundam fighting game. Well, there were actually several. And while the most legendary ones are the Battle Assault series on PlayStation 1, there was also a Gundam Wing specific version on SAS. And it was, at its time, one of the best looking 2D animated games in its era. You know, really went all in on trying to make this opening epic for what they could pull off with the Super Nintendo's chipset. But this is Gundam Wing Endless Duel. Here's the thing though, this isn't the original. You see, this never got released in America. Drop it down to easy, no limit. Because I'm not doing this to beat the game, I'm just demonstrating. But this never got released in America. And as a result of that, it never actually saw more than a cursory interest overseas. But now, as the Super Nintendo is no longer on the market and there's no real copyright to it, someone found a ROM and translated it into English and now makes reproduction copies of it, which are sold online. There's actually several people who do this. I found this on eBay. But every single one of these is from the original Gundam Wing series or run. And Heavy Arms, always my favorite because I'm the American and I'm going to shoot you a lot because that's how I roll. Seriously. I'm joking, of course, but my actual favorite was Tall Geese and, Gundam Epion. But this game used a similar system to what would be used, to what was later used in the Gundam Battle Assault. But this one, I believe, was by Banpresto, if I'm not mistaken. The Mega Blaster. This game was, for its time, like, this was absolutely incredibly well done. I'd argue it's one of the best 2D fighters of its era, and it's a freaking Gundam game, of all things. Now, granted, it did have a major balance issue, because anything above easy is brutally hard, especially after, like, the second or third opponent. But it's also a game that very much mirrors or matches the kind of stuff you saw with, like, Street Fighter. Sandrock. I was not a big fan of Sandrock until I played the Gundam Breaker series and discovered that his heat shotals were a pair of the most powerful weapons in the game and absolutely just monstrous. Mission complete. Now, notably, this game had no real audio. Like, there wasn't a lot of voiceover work or anything on this. It was all sound effects and music, because this was the Super Nintendo, and you had to make sacrifices to make a game look this good and have this level of fluidity and clarity. You usually had to do. There were certain things you had to be willing to sacrifice. One of the biggest was you normally had to sacrifice audio, because at the time, video and audio took up the largest amount of memory. Like, keep in mind, this is a 16-bit cartridge with maybe, who knows, a couple of megabytes of data. So you had to make it work with what you had limits on. Which is why, like, Super Metroid having that tiny bit of audio. Don't you rush and dance me. I will shoot you for that. There. Nice move. Yeah, even on easy, like the fights can get hard, especially like later on. The game is not subtle, but it's also a fact that this game does do the Street Fighter balancing thing, and certain characters naturally counteract others, with Gundam Wing having a natural advantage against heavy arms because of the shield, giving him a projectile block deflect. That's why Sandrock is so vulnerable, because he doesn't have that option, which makes him a lot more vulnerable to the guns. What was the quote from him in the show? The normal strategy would be to pin your enemy down and barrage them with an overwhelming volume of bullets. However, that tactic does not apply here. Gotcha. Got him. But yeah, like, this game was... I used to play this on my old ZNES emulator constantly. Having an actual physical copy, even if it is a reproduction, is... Yeah, Troa versus Wufei. Even having it as a reproduction is something I've wanted for years. But it's, like I said, it was never released outside Japan to my knowledge, at least not in America. And so it's like, I very much love the fact that I can get it as a reproduction now. That's it. Ah. You made me waste my ammo. I take that very personally. Oh, he actually teched me on that. Nope. You go to the ground. When I was younger, I used to play this game on hard difficulty when I had my reflexes and my my gaming ability was better. I've said it before, I'm sure, but don't get old, kids. Getting old sucks. You have all the money in the world, you don't have the time or the energy. You know what? Now, just blasting you with everything I got. Eat the volley. But that's the thing, like, I love games. I will always love games. But even as I look at it now, I acknowledge that, especially with competitive stuff, I no longer have the reflexes or talent I had as a kid. And to be fair, like, I was always pretty midline when it came to fighting games. Loved fighting games. In fact, I still do. But I'd be the first to admit I was never, like, super good at them. I have always loved the Tall Geese's design. I actually dislike the second series where it has the blue ornamentation. It actually makes it look less unique. I like the stark white because it gives it that sort of threatening, like, angel of death view. Yeah, Tall Geese. I always remember him being one of the hardest opponents. The Dauber gun was a bitch to fight off. Now the Tall Geese's biggest vulnerability is close range. If you can cut him off at close range, you can actually really hurt him. Because he's actually best as a sort of weird zoner. That being said, he'll rush you down if you let him. Yeah, I loved this game for years when I was younger. And it's still one of my favorites, but it is also very challenging. Zex Marquis. But, like, every single one has its unique style. The wings are a sort of Shoto Zoner hybrid. Sandrock is sort of a weird rushdowner, I remember. I don't remember Mercurius or Vayate much. But each of them was unique in how they handled the fighting style. They were all meant to play off an archetype. You know, see, like, Wing is the unapologetic, like, Wing is like the unapologetic, like beam cannon dude. Like, he hits you with the big blasters. See what I mean? Like, he's got the heavy weapons, and he'll hurt you a lot if you let him. But yeah, like I said, it is definitely one of those games that if you can get your hands on it and you like fighting games, it is an absolute must. Shinkido Senkai Gundam Wing Endless Duel. Bandai Namco Entertainment. Now, it was actually Natsume, not Banpresto. But there were a lot of really unique Gundam games back in the day. Of which Battle Assault is also one of them. Kido Gundam G, which was another Super Nintendo fighting game, which I'm still attempting to get my hands on. Speaking of which, I need to remember to add you to my wish list. There was the Kido Cincy V Gundam, which was a side-scrolling action game of sort of beat 'em up. Another one I need to add to my wish list. Like I said, the sheer amount of Gundam games available, it was kind of insane. And a lot of them were really good. Like, it was kind of surprising. And like because of when it came out, it was literally like the Super Nintendo and the PlayStation got the lion's share because they were all on that. Now this series right here, the Side Story series, actually got a re-release on PS3 with the Gundam Side Stories guide and stuff, which you can actually get still, though it is very expensive. I actually have a copy. Original Nintendo Gundam Scramble, Angel, and then of course away the new type, which was a Zeta Gundam, I believe. But yeah, like there was, like I always tell people, if you're big into anime games, then you definitely wanted to check out Bandai, because Bandai had the lockdown on it. Like Bandai had the lockdown on it. Lupin, Gundam, Akuma-kun, all that kind of stuff. And then of course there was stuff like this, Bokan to Apatsu, like there was so much stuff released back in those days. I tell people all the time, you have no idea how crazy things were getting overseas. Like, we saw maybe one fraction of how much stuff got released overseas. For good or for ill. For good or for ill. But, like, that was one of the best things about it. It was the sheer amount of stuff that was on the market. And I'm still collecting parts of it. UN Squadron, Pyo Pyo. I actually recently picked up the original arcade Sunset Riders on PlayStation. I've got the Super Nintendo version, but it is a censored version, which is unfortunate. But for a while, it was the only way you could get it. Got the Ranma. Got Killer Instinct, the actual Killer Instinct. You got Final Fight. I actually now have all of Final Fight because I have the Final Fight 1 and 2. But then over in my Saturn collection, I also have the actual Final Fight itself, I believe. Either Final Fight... Is it Saturn? No, it's Sega CD. That's right. I've got Final Fight on Sega CD. Final Fight CD. The Sega Classics, Eternal Champion, Cobra Command. I'm actually looking to pick up another piece on later this week because I recently found a copy of of the Terminator Sega CD game, and it is very real and very intact. It's also very expensive, so I'm gonna have to make a decision on that. But anyway, I wanted to get down that road with you and show you what I'd recently picked up. Still working on this one. I've been trying to get this to work, and for whatever reason, even after installing it, it will not run. Like, it's installed, everything looks fine, but the game itself never starts. And I think it's because it had some sort of copy protection on it that keeps it from operating. But usually, you run a PS1 game, it starts within about 10 seconds. This one never does. And I can demonstrate that because I can exit this, go back to my PS1 collection, run another Japanese game I have, Iretsuwaju, which is 1999. Same year that the Gundam game, same year that Spawn came out for the Super Nintendo. This came out for the PlayStation. Keep that in mind. These were same year as Spawn, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, like if you look at Spawn. Oh no, Spawn was 1995. This was 96. So. Yeah, these came out right at the end of the Super Nintendo era. Like, this was right as PlayStation was coming on. The US Vaju would be released in 1999. But if I hit US Vaju and start it, load OK. Use. They were gonna be a big hit. Yeah, shut up. I love this opening. This opening is infinitely better than the shit that came out in America. The game itself is pretty much the same. There's some minor censorship of it. But this opening's deletion should have been a criminal offense, if you ask me. This opening is so good. Like, they went all in. They were like, nah, we're gonna go full tilt on this shit. And the thing about Japan, like, Japan wasn't as prudish as we were at the time. Hell, they aren't as prudish as we are now at times. But Japan was very much of the opinion that if we're gonna make an anime fighting game, we're gonna make an anime fighting game and just go full fucking tilt with it. Anyway, but yeah, it runs. And it runs perfectly, without incident, exactly as it did on the original PlayStation. No issue, no problem. I can run the game, play the game, and it just runs fine. And any other PS1 game I have that is Japanese will do exactly the same. Which I do have several, including the Japanese PlayStation One Piece game, the Psychic Force 2, Ranma Battle Renaissance, which is a very hard fighting game. So this is the only one that hasn't worked, and I'm still trying to figure out why. Didn't I have Paradius? Yes, I did. And I have Paradius. And, like, that runs fine. All of them do. I can run Dragon Ball Legends. I can run Urgeist. I can run Einhander. All of them work just fine. So, like, 95% of the games, I'd say, run without incident. The problem is almost invariably down to the game itself. If there's something weird about the game itself not working. Now, TurboGrafx, I'm still collecting that. That's very hard to get your hands on. Most of those are extremely expensive. I have quite a good Saturn collection I'm working on. Okay. So yeah, I've got that. But yeah, like, this is the thing. Like, if you're into retro gaming, there's a lot of ways to go about it, but the Polymega I still say is one of the best options simply because the physical hardware is always preferable and they make it easy. I need to get this weekend I'm going to order the Genesis adapter and start collecting Genesis hardware, which I'm running out of storage now. But anyway, I just wanted to demonstrate, some of the new stuff I picked up, and the Polymega continues to evolve and is continuing to develop. My NES and Super NES collections continue to grow. Definitely say the NES and the PlayStation are my best collections thus far. And the system still receives regular and consistent updates. Like you can come here anytime, check for updates, and the system will say update available. They just updated it again within the last couple of days. So if you wanted to, you can update it again. I'm telling you, they're not backing down. They're pushing forward with this, so it's worth looking into. And no, this is not sponsored stream or nothing. I don't have sponsors. I work for a living. But I do think Polymega is one of the systems that, yes, the price is kind of high, but I think it's worth it in the long term, because I think you'll get much better performance overall from this platform than you will from trying to collect the original hardware, which is, much of it is either falling apart or is hard to get nowadays. There are cloned machines, there are cloned platforms, but the Polymega allows you to do all of them easily and with minimal fuss or challenge. I highly recommend it. Anyway, This will be posting immediately, and then I'll be doing some more Death Stranding down the road. But yeah, like definitely, if you're interested in the retro gaming scene, I highly recommend Polymega. And as I mentioned on a previous video, the arcade archives are also a great way to get some retro gaming goodness for PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and Switch. Definitely worth looking into. Anyway, this is the Solo Gamer, and yeah, we'll not get that update later. But we'll get this stuff continuing to evolve as we go, and hopefully down the road, I'll find more games to share with you all. Either way, I will see you guys later. You have a great day and take care, and I will see you for more Death Stranding in the next few days. Ciao.